eating kebabs, the meat sizzling on the grill. I was cozied up by the fire, sipping tea, when I created a group chat with my ex-boyfriend and my former best friend, who were out there fighting for their lives. I sent them a video. With a sweet smile, I asked, "Want some?" I was reborn. In my last life, I caught my boyfriend, Jake, cheating on me with my best friend, Amber. When I exposed their plot to steal my money and kill me, they flew into a rage and threw me outside. I never would have imagined that in September, of all times, a freak blizzard would hit. The temperature dropped to 50 below zero overnight, and I froze to death on my own doorstep. I was filled with so much hate. As my consciousness faded, I swore a venomous oath. If I get another chance, I will make that damn couple wish they were never born. The numbing cold was suddenly replaced by scorching heat. Someone nudged me. "Chloe, can you hurry it up?" I opened my eyes in shock. I was standing at the entrance of my office building. A co-worker behind me was getting impatient because I was blocking the way. Was I? I reflexively checked my phone. August 13th. I was reborn. I had come back to 20 days before I was murdered. I was overjoyed and overwhelmed. First, I laughed hysterically, and then I broke down crying. I wanted to rush back right then and kill those two bastards. But I quickly calmed myself down. I remembered the sudden, unnatural, and terrifying blizzard that had killed me. This summer had been ridiculously hot. Everyone was surviving on AC. By the end of August, things had finally started to cool down. But who could have predicted that just after the start of September, I would freeze to death? So the most important thing right now wasn't getting revenge on those two. It was figuring out how to survive the coming cold snap, however long it might last. Ignoring the looks from my co-workers, who clearly thought I'd lost my mind, I went to my boss and quit. Then, I went back to the apartment I shared with Jake and packed up all my important belongings. But I wasn't in a hurry to leave. On the way back, I had already hatched a plan. Even if I was leaving, I wasn't going to let him off easy. I found Jake's ID, downloaded several loan apps, and entered all his information. Then I cooked a feast and waited for him to come home from work. When Jake walked in the door and saw me with a sweet smile and a table full of food, he was stunned. I told him gently that I had decided to sell one of the houses my parents left me to buy the one he had his eye on for our marital home. Jake and Amber had been scheming for ages about how to trick me into selling my parents' property, so they could take the money. Seeing that I had finally caved, he was ecstatic. He moved in to kiss me, but I pushed him away. "Let's eat." I took a week of PTO, so I have to go see a realtor first thing in the morning. During dinner, I playfully took out my phone, saying I wanted to make funny videos with him. Jake always hated being on camera, but since he needed me to sell the house, he was completely compliant. He blinked when I told him to blink and shook his head when I told him to shake his head. As soon as the notifications showed that over $100,000 in loans had been deposited from the apps, I uninstalled them and put my phone down with a smile. Ugh, I can't get it right. Let's just forget it. We both enjoyed the meal. The atmosphere was, for once, perfectly harmonious. The next day, after Jake left for work, I packed up my things, grabbed my cat, Lucky, and left. My parents had left me 2 properties before they passed away. One was a condo downtown in a good school district, which I'd been renting out since I left for college. The other was a small villa in a suburb at the foot of Redwood Hills. Although it was a bit remote and not as valuable as a villa in the city, it was more than enough to trade for a nice modern condo downtown. But this was my home. I would never sell it. The house had been empty for a long time. While I hired cleaners to tidy up, I started thinking about how to prepare it to withstand the deadly cold. Floor heating? The furnace? No, neither would work. With that much snow, the water pipes would definitely freeze and burst, and power lines would snap. Relying on central heating was impossible. Then, the bomb shelter. I suddenly jumped up and ran to the basement. On the eastern wall, there was an iron door. I grabbed the rusty handle and pulled hard, and a gust of cool air rushed out. This was it. When my dad was renovating the house years ago, this wall of the basement, which backed up against Redwood Hills, had collapsed, revealing a bomb shelter built during World War II. The shelter was about 13 feet wide and 165 feet long. It was cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and the air inside was dry. My dad had cleaned it up and used it as a storage room. In the summer, the three of us would even sleep down there. It was so comfortably cool. My mom used to joke that the shelter saved us a fortune on our electric bill. With this climate-controlled shelter, what did I have to fear from extreme heat or cold? I had the cleaners tidy up the bomb shelter, then hired a few workers to give the whole interior a fresh coat of whitewash. By the time that was done, it was already dark. Jake called, his voice dripping with affection, asking about the house sale. I gave him a few vague answers and hung up. That bastard was such an actor. His mouth was full of how much he missed me, yet he hadn't even noticed my things were gone. He was probably celebrating with Amber, thinking he'd finally tricked me into selling the house. But I had no time to deal with him. I had more important things to do. The next morning, I hired someone to modify the shelter's ventilation shafts. I clearly remembered that before I died, the snow had already been waist deep. The original vents would definitely get clogged. The contractor just took my money and did the work, no questions asked. He extended each vent with long stainless steel pipes, welding a cap on top of each one. That way, snow couldn't fall in and block the airflow. Next, I bought 2 wood-burning stoves. One was purely for heating, the other could be used for both heating and cooking. Both had chimneys that could be vented outside, so I didn't have to worry about carbon monoxide poisoning. After the workers installed them, I bought a massive supply of firewood and charcoal, along with a grill. When the apocalypse came, I couldn't count on water, electricity, or gas. Only old-fashioned firewood was reliable for both heat and cooking. Even though the shelter was temperature stable, I had no idea how insanely low the temperatures would get. It was better to be over-prepared. Thinking about the pipes freezing, I hired a contractor to drill a well in the basement. Just like the shelter, the well water would stay at a constant temperature. No matter how cold it got outside, it wouldn't freeze. The well driller was surprised. He said people usually put wells in their yards, not their basements. I had my excuse ready. I told him I was developing a new skincare line that required water untouched by sunlight. My completely straight-faced bullshit seemed to convince him. With a look of admiration, he got the well finished in no time. Next came stockpiling supplies. Before I died, the snow had reached my waist in a single night. It was impossible to go outside. Without supplies at home, you'd starve to death if you didn't freeze first. Assuming there would be no electricity, I bought 30 boxes of candles, 20 solar-powered lamps, 20 high-capacity power banks, 2 boxes of matches, 2 boxes of lighters, and 2 boxes of windproof torches. 500 pounds of rice, 50 pounds of flour, 20 cases of dried noodles, 20 cases of instant ramen, and 200 cases of bottled water. All sorts of dried vegetables, chicken feet, duck necks, potato chips, beef jerky, rice noodles, vermicelli, sodas, coffee, and all kinds of canned goods. Tissues, pads, disposable underwear, shampoo, body wash, face wash, toothpaste, toothbrushes, skincare products, and every kind of medicine, gauze, and disinfectant I could think of. Down comforters of various thicknesses, down jackets of various thicknesses, hats, scarves, waterproof gloves, high-top insulated boots, snow goggles, and masks. I also bought snow shovels, axes, saws, and various other tools and self-defense weapons I might need. I bought all new furniture, a bed, a table, chairs, a bookshelf. I couldn't bring myself to move or change a single piece of the old furniture. I had an almost neurotic compulsion to keep everything exactly as it was when my parents were alive. That way, I could pretend the car crash 3 years ago never happened, that they had just stepped out and would be back soon. Supplies arrived in a steady stream. The property management and neighbors had already seen the construction work happening at my house. My explanation was that the house had been empty for a while and needed a complete renovation. So they weren't surprised to see the delivery trucks. It's normal to pour money into a house before you move in. By the time I had everything organized, there was only a week left before the cold snap. During that time, Jake called me every day to ask about the house sale. I nearly burst out laughing several times. I checked the security camera I'd installed the day I left. There he was talking to me in that loving tone while cuddling with Amber. Fighting back my disgust, I put on a baby voice and asked Jake, "Do you love me?" "Of course I do. I love my baby more than anything," he cooed. then planted a loud kiss on Amber's cheek. "Did you hear that, baby? That was a kiss for you." Amber and he broke into silent, giddy laughter. I crossed my legs and said coolly, "I heard it. But for some reason, it sounded like you were kissing a pig." Amber, who was in his arms, immediately shot up, her face furious and ready to explode. Jake quickly put a finger to his lips to silence her while saying to me, "Silly girl, don't call yourself a pig." "Oh, I wasn't talking about me. I was talking about, hey, by the way, have you seen Amber lately?" Jake got a little nervous and waved his hands frantically at Amber. "No, why would I see her?" I feigned a sigh of relief. "Good. She's been trying to borrow money everywhere to pay off her brother's gambling debts." I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't listen. The day I left, I saw a woman who looked a lot like her going into a hotel with some short, fat guy, but well, I hope it wasn't her. On the camera feed, I watched the color drain from Jake's face. Amber looked panicked. I smiled and hung up. Amber and I were college classmates. Her family always favored her brother, who was a good-for-nothing. I felt sorry for her, and did my best to help her. Even when she slept with that old creep, Mr. Wong, to pay off her brother's debts, I only felt heartbroken for her. I never looked down on her or said a word about it to Jake. I treated her like a sister, but she not only stole my boyfriend but also wanted me dead. In my past life, I installed a camera at home because my cat, Lucky, kept getting mysteriously injured. Before I even had a chance to tell Jake about it, I saw him and Amber doing unspeakable things in my bed. Afterward, Amber urged Jake to hurry up and trick me into selling the house and buying a life insurance policy. She said if I wouldn't cooperate, he should just marry me first and then find an opportunity to get rid of me. As my sole heir, all my family's assets would become his. My family's assets were just the 2 houses and 3 well-located commercial properties. We were comfortable, but by no means rich. I never imagined that for such a small fortune, the woman I considered my best friend would want me dead. In my last life, I was so furious I rushed back to confront them. When I exposed them, those 2 bastards threw me out of the apartment I had rented for my own convenience. I was the legal tenant of that place. The humiliation of being beaten and thrown out, the agony of freezing to death, the memory of begging them to open the door, just to let me grab my phone and ID, and their refusal, my heart filled with pure hatred. On the monitor, Jake was already interrogating Amber, who was swearing up and down that she hadn't been with another man and accusing me of slander. I watched them tear into each other with a smirk, wondering just how long it would take for them to notice all my stuff was gone. I was even more curious to see Jake's reaction when he discovered he was drowning in debt. Unfortunately for them, they knew my parents left me property, but they had no idea where it was. So even when he realized I'd played him, he wouldn't be able to find me. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face. I turned off the monitor and went to the farmer's market to pick up the pork and vegetables I'd ordered. When I got home, the cleaner I'd hired had already gathered 8 or 9 other women at my door. They all came in and got straight to work, washing vegetables, mixing fillings, kneading dough. With practiced hands, they started making dumplings, wontons, and meatballs. Homemade is always better, both in terms of ingredients and hygiene. The last thing I wanted was to get food poisoning during an apocalypse. I had already rented 5 commercial freezers just for food storage. Once the cold snap hit, the outdoors would be a natural deep freeze. I wouldn't have to worry about a power outage then. The women were amazed at how many dumplings I was having them make. I told them they were for a local nursing home. As we worked, I chatted with them, casually bringing up topics like soaring electricity prices in Finland forcing people to hoard firewood for winter, and Germany's natural gas shortage creating a heating crisis. Finally, my expression turned serious. Even though we're doing fine here, you never know. It's probably a good idea to stock up on things like charcoal. If you don't use it, no big deal. It's better to have it and not need it, you know? The seeds of anxiety I'd been planting had taken root. They all nodded in agreement. You're right. Better safe than sorry. I breathed a silent sigh of relief. I hoped they'd actually go out and buy some. When a disaster like this hits, you save who you can. After the 5 freezers were packed full, the long heat wave finally broke, and people welcomed the long-awaited cool weather. But I knew it was just a little treat from the Grim Reaper before his arrival. I started having a local farmer deliver vegetables. Aside from a few greens like spinach, it was all cabbage, sweet potatoes, and squash, things that would last a long time. I stored them all in the deep end of the bomb shelter. Finally, I had someone reinforce my doors and windows. I wasn't really worried about security when the cold hit. The snow would be waist deep overnight, making travel impossible. I was more afraid the doors and windows would be damaged by the pressure of the snow and cold, which would ruin the house. After all this was done, there were only 2 days left. Jake had finally discovered the massive debt in his name. He called me, demanding to know what was going on. I was lounging on the sofa, slowly stroking Lucky, who was purring on my lap. Debt, I said lazily. I don't know what you're talking about. The money was all transferred to your card. Don't try to deny it. Jake was furious. Chloe, what the hell are you playing at? Money. My tone sharpened slightly. You mean the $123,000 you transferred to me a few days ago? So you admit it, he roared, then caught himself. What do you mean I transferred it to you? When did I ever transfer you money? I replied in a shocked voice. What? The night before I left. You said you were paying back the money you borrowed from me. I told you there was no rush, but you said it's best to settle debts, even between friends. Jake was clearly stunned. What are you talking about? I sent him a picture of an IOU. It clearly stated that he had borrowed $123,000 in cash from me, verified, to be repaid within a year with 2% interest. Jake exploded. When did I ever borrow money from you? I feigned shock. What do you mean? Are you trying to get out of it? Of course, he denied it, screaming over the phone for me to return the money immediately or he'd sue me. I laughed coldly. I wouldn't have done it if I was afraid of him suing. I had the whole paper trail ready. The IOU, records of a large cash withdrawal, and the bank's security footage. I had forged the IOU, of course, but the signature was his. A word to the wise. Never sign your name on a blank piece of paper. The record of the large cash withdrawal was even simpler. It was the settlement money from my parents' car accident. Before the new year, my uncle's construction business was in a bind, so I withdrew the cash to help him make payroll. I was a little scared to withdraw over $100,000 in cash by myself, so I asked Jake to come with me. I remember after the bank counted it all out, he was the one who carried the bag. The date on the IOU was that exact day. Even if he survived the apocalypse, with a paper trail that's solid, no judge would ever side with him. Once I had recorded enough of Jake trying to skip out on his debt, I hung up and went out for dinner. I wanted to cherish these last few days of peace. I got my favorite Sichuan food, bought a huge bouquet of flowers, and took a leisurely stroll home. The whole time, Jake was blowing up my phone, sending a barrage of angry texts. I didn't block him, nor did I reply. Let his anger distract him. That way, he wouldn't notice that I'd thrown out all the heavy blankets and winter clothes from the rental apartment. Perfect. On the final day of the countdown, I did one last check of the shelter's ventilation shafts and locked up the house. To prevent the pipes from bursting, I turned off the main water valve after my shower and drained all the pipes. Then I brought the bedding, which had been airing out for days, into the bomb shelter and made my bed and a nest for Lucky. I would be sleeping here tonight. The long shelter felt like a dark, endless tunnel with the lights off. I was a little scared to be in there alone, so I set up a wooden screen to visually block off the deep, consuming darkness. After a shower, I lay in bed and streamed a show. My phone rang. It was Amber. I ignored it and opened the security feed on my iPad. As expected, Amber was there. But the lovey-dovey atmosphere was gone. Jake was fuming, and Amber was frantically dialing her phone over and over. Finally, she threw her phone down and cursed. I can't believe she's so manipulative. I never saw it all these years. Then she turned on Jake. And how could you be so stupid? You just do whatever she says. Are you an idiot? Jake erupted. It was you who kept saying she was naive and easy to fool. Why else would I have trusted her so much? So now you're blaming me? Amber's face hardened. Or maybe what she said is true, and you really did borrow that money from her? No way, Jake yelled. Then what about the IOU? How should I know? I fell asleep to the sound of their fighting. It was laughable. Even at this point, they still hadn't noticed my stuff was gone. I woke up around 3 a.m. I stuck a hand out from under the covers to feel the air. It was definitely much colder. I threw on a thick, long robe and left the shelter. The moment I stepped out, a shiver ran through me. I hurried up to the first floor, which was even colder than the basement. Even wrapped tightly in my robe, I couldn't stop shaking. With trembling hands, I pulled back the curtains. The world outside was a blinding white. Huge, cotton-like clumps were falling from the sky. It was a blizzard. The apocalyptic cold had arrived right on schedule. The power was still on. I went back to the shelter, swapped my silk comforter for a down one, and added a wool blanket on top. Being wrapped in layers of warm textiles gave me a profound sense of satisfaction. I picked up my iPad. On the security feed, Jake and Amber were huddled together on the sofa, wrapped in every piece of clothing they owned and the single thin summer blanket. The heat was on, but Amber's teeth were still chattering. "How can there not be a single heavy blanket?" she asked, her voice choked with tears. "How is this happening?" Jake, shivering, shook his head. "I don't know. Chloe always handled that stuff." He suddenly froze. "Wait a minute. I think Chloe's things are gone." Well, they finally noticed. Lying in my warm bed, I couldn't help but laugh out loud at the iPad screen. You'll soon find out that it's not just the blankets and warm clothes that are gone. There's no food either. Before I left, I cleared out and threw away every bit of food in the apartment, leaving only some drinks. Neither Jake nor Amber ever cooked. When I wasn't there, they ordered takeout. They would have no idea there wasn't even a single grain of rice in the house. I could only pray that someone was still delivering takeout in this weather. As I was enjoying my laugh, my phone started ringing frantically. It was Jake. I answered. "Chloe, you." He seemed so enraged that he choked on his words. All I could hear was his ragged breathing. I stayed silent, waiting. The feeling of a cat toying with a mouse was exhilarating. "Chloe, what the hell are you trying to do?" Jake finally asked, his voice calmer after a deep breath. My tone was nonchalant. "What are you talking about? You said you were going to sell the house, but you were lying, weren't you? You took all your things. You never planned on coming back, did you?" He seethed. The part about selling the house wasn't necessarily a lie, but the part about taking my things and never seeing you again was definitely true. I chuckled softly. "Jake, you were hoping I wouldn't come back anyway, weren't you?" What do you mean?" "Umph. If you cared about me even a little bit, you wouldn't have only just noticed today that my things were gone." I sneered. "And you wouldn't have forgotten that I told you I was taking a week of vacation. A week has long passed, but you never once asked why I wasn't back." With that, I hung up, switched my phone to silent, and went back to sleep. When I woke up again, it was 10 a.m. My phone was filled with angry messages from Jake, which I swiped past with a smile. I couldn't bring myself to block him. How could I ever repay the torment of freezing to death in my past life if I couldn't watch him lose his mind? I opened my messaging app. It was flooded with messages. A few people were excited about the snow, but most were complaining about being unable to get to work, wondering how a September day could turn so cold overnight and bring such a heavy blizzard. This was the South, for crying out loud. But whether they were happy or complaining, no one had yet realized that this was a catastrophe. Probably because the people who had already frozen to death last night couldn't get online anymore. I put down my phone, got up, and washed my face. I went to the first floor kitchen and saw the gas was still on, so I started making breakfast. On a cold day like this, nothing hits the spot like a hot bowl of noodles. I brought the water to a boil, dropped in the noodles, and let them cook through. I took out a large porcelain bowl and added a spoonful of lard, a spoonful of soy sauce, a spoonful of vinegar, a spoonful of sesame oil, a pinch of salt, and for the finishing touch, a sprinkle of finely chopped garlic chives. I drained the noodles into the bowl, topped them with a poached egg, and poured the steaming broth over everything. A fragrant, piping hot, and simple noodle soup was ready. I brought the bowl down to the shelter, poured some kibble and warm milk for Lucky, then opened my iPad to catch up on the news while I ate. The noodles were perfectly cooked, the egg yolk was runny, and the broth was savory and delicious. I finished the huge bowl in no time, a comforting warmth spreading through my body. After eating, I stretched and went back upstairs. As long as the gas and electricity were still working, I decided I might as well use them. I had no idea how long this cold would last, so it was best to conserve the firewood I'd stockpiled. That's when I noticed the snow had almost buried the windows. Through the small gaps, I could see thick clumps of snow still falling fast and heavy, like a downpour. I suddenly realized that if the snow kept up like this, my 2-story house would soon be completely buried. Once it covered the shelter's ventilation shafts, I would suffocate in my own home. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. The snow was still coming down with ferocious intensity. I couldn't stop it. The only thing I could do was shovel. I quickly changed into a windproof down jacket, put on a thick hat, scarf and gloves, and opened the door from the second floor to the terrace. I couldn't get to the vents on the hill, but thankfully, 2 of them were close to the terrace. I just needed to keep those 2 clear to avoid suffocating. I had preemptively changed all the exterior doors to open inwards and bought a stepladder. When I opened the door, the snow on the terrace was already up to my chin. Luckily, it was still fluffy powder and hadn't frozen solid. Huffing and puffing, I spent what felt like an eternity shoveling the snow off the terrace and into the yard. Seeing that the 2 vents were clear, I breathed a sigh of relief. Next, I used the ladder to climb onto the roof. To prevent it from collapsing under the weight of the snow, I had paid a lot to have it reinforced with a steel frame. But even so, I couldn't just let the snow pile up. The roof was large, and in the sub-zero temperatures, my body was nearly frozen stiff. My thick winter gear felt as thin as paper against the biting cold. I gritted my teeth and pushed on, but the snow was just too heavy. I turned my head for a second, and the spot I just cleared would be ankle-deep again. A sense of panic started to set in. At this rate, the second floor would be buried by tomorrow afternoon. Where would I shovel the snow then? I never thought that after all my preparations, I'd forgotten to consider that my house wasn't tall enough to withstand a relentless blizzard. The thought that I might suffocate before Jake and Amber, who were probably on the 6th floor of their building, froze to death, left a bitter taste in my mouth. After finally clearing the roof, I tied 2 red silk ribbons to the vents. That way, if the house did get buried, I could use the red color to locate them. Once that was done, I went back inside. To my surprise, the electricity and gas were still on. How nice for Jake and Amber. If the power was on, the heat would still work. They wouldn't freeze to death just yet. The temperature in the bomb shelter was significantly warmer than outside. I took off my jacket, hat and gloves, and changed into a loose, comfortable fleece sweatsuit. After a moment's thought, I lit one of the wood stoves. I could handle the temperature in the shelter, but after seeing how bad the blizzard was, I needed to ensure the vents stayed clear. The stove's chimney pipe ran a long way through the vent shaft and was fixed about 3 feet away from the opening. The heat from the stove would make the chimney pipe scorching hot, melting any snow that landed on it and preventing the vent from getting blocked. The dry firewood caught quickly, and soon a cheerful fire was roaring in the stove. Before long, the shelter felt as warm as a spring day. I took off my fleece jacket, put a pot of tea on the stove, and sat on the couch in a thick velour robe, stretching contentedly. The tea was my favorite white tea, fragrant but not bitter. I poured a cup to let it cool and picked up my iPad to check the feed. On the sofa, Jake's face was blue with cold as he cursed. That bitch Chloe. As soon as this snow stops, I'm going to find her. I won't let her get away with this. Amber was shivering and crying. Honey, I'm hungry. Jake didn't say anything. Amber's crying grew louder. Honey, I'm so hungry. Hungry, hungry, hungry. Who isn't hungry? Jake yelled. Damn it, no one's picking up my takeout orders. What am I supposed to do? How can you not have any food here at all? Amber started throwing a tantrum. Eat, 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 that's all you know. Seeing those 2 bastards in such a pathetic state instantly lifted my spirits. I put down the iPad and picked up my phone. Countless missed calls and abusive texts, all from Jake, which I ignored. A few were from Amber, all asking how I was and where I was. Wow. She was still pretending she didn't know I knew about her and Jake. Still playing innocent. I skimmed them and didn't reply. I opened the group chat for their apartment building. The landlady had added me after I signed the lease so I could get community updates. The chat was buzzing about the blizzard. By now, no one cared about work anymore. They were all complaining about the water being shut off and the intense cold. So the water was already out. No wonder those two idiots hadn't thought to soak their feet in hot water or anything. First, I sent a message to the group chat to grab everyone's attention. Then, I offered a friendly warning that this weather was extremely unusual, and there was no telling how long it would last. I advised everyone to conserve their drinking water, food, and warm clothing, and to prepare for the worst. I told them to lock their doors and windows. If the snow didn't stop and the temperature kept dropping, people without food, water, or warm clothes would do anything to survive. Jake and Amber wouldn't just sit there and wait to die. When they couldn't take it anymore, they would definitely ask their neighbors for help. I had to cut off that possibility. To be honest, it was probably unnecessary. I still remembered the day I froze to death, how I had banged on the doors of my neighbors across the hall and downstairs, begging for a warm coat, or even just for them to call the police. Not a single door opened. But I didn't hate them for it. In a disaster, it's every person for themselves. No one owed me anything. I only hated Jake and Amber, those two bastards. After giving the neighbors a heads up, I opened my chat with Amber and replied, "I'm at home. You." On my iPad screen, Amber looked like she was in a frozen daze. It was Jake who saw my message. He quickly handed her the phone. "Quick, that bitch Chloe replied to you." Amber's voice was tearful. "So what? Is she going to bring us food? Or clothes and blankets?" "Well, look at that. She wasn't a total idiot." Jake slapped her. "Are you fucking stupid? Ask for her address, so we can go find her and get our money back when the snow stops." Amber took the phone, her fingers obviously stiff with cold. A long time passed, and I didn't receive a single message. I turned off the lights and took a picture of the fireplace. In the dark background, you could only see the warm glow of the fire, the tea in front of me, and a few small pastries. I sent the photo to Amber, then sent a voice message in a lazy tone. "Wow, I can't believe it's snowing this hard. It's a good thing I have a fireplace at home, or I'd freeze to death." Amber's expression and movements immediately stiffened. Then she gritted her teeth. She's by a fire. She has food. How can she be so comfortable? How dare she? Jake was clearly provoked too. After staring blankly for a moment, he urged Amber to ask for my address. Instead, Amber tried to call me, but I declined it. I replied, telling her I was hungry and was going to make dinner. Jake snatched the phone and started calling me relentlessly. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, tossed it aside, and went to make myself something to eat. I had worked up an appetite shoveling snow all morning, so I decided to make a nice lunch. I washed, chopped, and blanched a defrosted chicken. Then I washed and cut some potatoes and green beans. I heated a wok until it was smoking hot, added oil, and stir-fried the potatoes and green beans until they were nearly done, then set them aside. Next, I threw the chicken into the wok with scallions, ginger, bay leaves, and star anise. I deglazed with cooking wine, added soy sauce and vinegar, then covered it with water and brought it to a boil. I carried the pot into the bomb shelter. Today, I had lit the stove that could be used for both heating and cooking. I set the pot on top to simmer. If it weren't for the heavy smoke, I would have done the initial cooking down here too. This was my dad's favorite dish, a hearty chicken and potato stew. A big pot of meat and vegetables, fragrant and steaming, perfect with rice. I had premium rice steaming in the rice cooker, filling the air with an irresistible aroma. Normally, I wouldn't splurge on such nice rice, but in an apocalypse, who knew how long I had left? I deserved to treat myself. After about half an hour, I poked the chicken with a chopstick. It was tender. I added the stir-fried potatoes and green beans. My dad had taught me that pre-frying the potatoes keeps them from turning to mush in the stew. 10 minutes later, the vegetables had absorbed all the flavor. I moved the pot to the table, stir-fried a side of greens, and sat down to eat. But I'm a kind person. How could I eat and drink my fill and forget about Jake and Amber? Of course, I had to take a picture of this delicious stew for them to see. I picked up my phone and took a flurry of pictures. The best one was of a glistening, sauce-covered drumstick placed on a bed of fluffy rice with a few vibrant green vegetables on the side. You could practically smell it through the screen. I generously sent all the pictures to Amber. If you can't eat it, at least you can look at it. On the monitor, Amber looked at her phone and burst into tears. She started pounding on Jake. I'm starving to death. Do something. What does she mean by this? Why is she sending me this? Jake was busy calling the police for help. Officer, we don't have any food or warm clothes. We're going to freeze to death. Please come rescue us. I couldn't hear what the person on the other end said, but Jake's brow furrowed deeper and deeper. I couldn't help but sneer. I didn't even have to guess. I knew the police were powerless. With snow taller than a person, were they supposed to fly over? Did he think they were superheroes? Jake hung up, his face ashen. Amber clung to him again, calling me a bitch and shoving the pictures on her phone in his face, her expression twisted with rage. Tell me, what the hell does she mean by this? Jake stared at the phone, his face dark, his eyes filled with venom. In the evening, I went back up to the second-floor terrace to check the vents. The snow was still coming down hard. The red ribbons I'd tied to the vents whipped around in the wind. Steam rose from the chimney opening where snowflakes instantly evaporated upon contact. The snow had already piled up to the second-story windows. All I could do was push as much of it away as possible to keep the terrace clear. Thankfully, I'd had the vents extended with long steel pipes, so they wouldn't be buried for at least another 2 days. But the temperature had dropped even further. I had no idea how cold it was, but my phone shut down the second I took it outside. My teeth chattering, I rushed back to the bomb shelter and huddled in front of the fire for a long time before I finally warmed up. Then I noticed I couldn't connect to the security camera at Jake and Amber's place anymore. The building's group chat was filled with despair. The power was out. Without electricity, the heat wouldn't work. For Jake and Amber, who had no warm clothes or blankets, it would be a living hell. I should have been happy, but right then, I couldn't feel any joy. My phone was blowing up with news updates. Besides the cries for help, there were grim reports about the number of people who had frozen to death in the blizzard. I saw that nearly every military unit, police officer, party member, civil servant, and countless volunteers had joined the snow removal and rescue efforts. Thousands of power line workers were braving the sub-zero temperatures, risking their lives to reach fault locations. They were climbing frozen, slippery poles to repair lines snapped by the heavy snow. In just one day, there were already reports of more than a dozen workers who had gone missing or fallen to their deaths. My nose started to burn. After what I had been through, after the betrayal that made me shudder every time I thought about it, I thought my heart had turned to stone. But seeing these heroes sacrifice their lives for the disaster, I couldn't stop the tears from flowing. I guess I had been too narrow-minded. For every calculating villain in the world, there are heroes willing to lay down their lives for others. After I cried it out, I suddenly lost interest in Jake and Amber's fate. Compared to the heroes fighting this disaster, those two were nothing more than maggots. I searched for a local volunteer group and applied to join. Maybe it was the renewed sense of purpose, but that night, I slept more soundly than I had in a long time, without a single dream. When I woke up, it was 7 a.m. The fire in the stove had gone out, but the temperature in the shelter was still bearable. Remembering the plan from the volunteer group chat, I jumped out of bed, washed up using water from a thermos, and checked the kitchen on the first floor. The gas was still working, so I boiled myself some dumplings. Beef and fennel filling, my favorite. After finishing a large bowl, soup and all, I rested for a bit with a full stomach, then changed into my down jacket, hat and gloves and went outside to work. The snow had fallen relentlessly all night, and was now nearly up to the second-floor windows. I cleared the terrace and the roof first, then started on the yard. The plan from the volunteer group was for everyone to clear a path from their own front door outwards, gradually connecting the paths. If we could just create a way out, we could start rescuing people. But I was just one person, and I didn't have the strength. After clearing the terrace and the roof, I worked on the yard for what felt like hours and only managed to dig a small pit a couple of feet deep. I gave up. At this rate, I'd die of exhaustion before I ever reached the gate. Dejected, I went back to the shelter and checked my phone. Everyone in the group chat was discouraged. They were all saying the same thing. This plan wasn't working. The snow was just too deep. It was like trying to move a mountain with a shovel. We all wondered how the power line workers, soldiers, and police were getting around. After some searching, we found out they were using all sorts of methods. Some laid down wooden planks to walk on the snow, others tied wide boards to their feet like snowshoes, and some groups were just brute forcing their way through. We were both amazed and inspired. We could find wooden planks, too. But all I had was firewood, and the guy who sold it to me had neatly split every piece into perfect logs. They couldn't substitute for planks. I tried tying the logs together with rope to make a small raft and strapping it to my boots. But the moment I stepped onto the snow, I sank, and the snow completely buried me. Panicked, I flailed my arms and legs. Thankfully, the snow was still loose, and after a struggle, I managed to clear the snow from above my head and gasp for air. Luckily, I had tied a rope around my waist before I went down, with the other end secured to the terrace railing. I pulled on the rope, dragging myself back to the edge of the terrace, then untied the makeshift raft and climbed up the stepladder. That plan was a bust, too. I climbed onto the roof and looked around. The houses in my neighborhood were all spaced about 60 feet apart. In the thick snow, all I could see were the rooftops, like gray lids on a white sea. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted, "Hey, is anyone out there?" I waited for a long time, but there was no reply. A knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. Could it be that they didn't make it through the cold? That they had all frozen to death? No, that couldn't be right. The power was still on in our area. They could run their heaters and bundle up in warm clothes and blankets. They wouldn't have frozen to death so quickly. I shouted a few more times and finally, a voice called back, "Yes, someone's here." Overjoyed, I looked in the direction of the voice and saw a crack in the window of Mr. Peterson's house, to the west of mine. Mr. Peterson was shouting out to me, "Is that you, Chloe? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath and shouted back, "Mr. Peterson, are you all right?" "I'm doing okay," he replied. "It's freezing out here. What are you doing on the roof? Get back inside and be safe." This unexpected concern brought a lump to my throat. Mr. Peterson and my family had never been particularly close. In fact, he could be a bit grumpy. Once, my mom's dog got out and pooped on his lawn, and he stood at our door and yelled for an entire afternoon. I rubbed my nose, blinking back the warmth in my eyes, and managed a smile. "It's good to know you're okay. I was just checking." He suddenly sighed. "I'm fine, but your auntie has a fever, and we're out of medicine. I don't know what to do." "A fever?" I was instantly alarmed. In this weather, a fever with no medicine could be a death sentence. But thankfully, I had some. Then it hit me. I had medicine, but how could I get it to him? I thought it, and then I asked it out loud. At first, Mr. Peterson was clearly excited, but then he too fell silent. We stared at each other from 100 feet away. As I was racking my brain, an idea struck me. I shouted for him to wait, then ran back to the shelter. I grabbed a little bit of everything, fever reducers, antibiotics, painkillers, whatever I had, and sealed them tightly in a plastic bag. Then I found my crossbow and went back to the roof. I tied the bag to the shaft of an arrow. Mr. Peterson had already opened his window. I pulled the trigger, and the arrow, carrying the medicine, flew across the gap and landed on his balcony. Mr. Peterson was so happy he started to cry. He shouted, "Chloe, you just saved your auntie's life." It was too cold outside. I was so frozen standing in the wind and snow that I could barely speak. I gave him a wave and hurried back to the shelter. I added a few more logs to the stove and shivered in front of the fire, waiting to thaw out before I took off my heavy coat. Just as I was about to pour myself a glass of water, everything went black, leaving only the flickering light of the fire. The power was out. I couldn't help but sigh. It had finally come to this. Without electricity, I didn't know how Mr. and Mrs. Peterson would survive. I took out a rechargeable emergency lamp and turned it on, then checked the time on my phone. It was already past 2 p.m. As if on cue, my stomach started to rumble. But I wasn't in the mood to cook anything complicated. I boiled some more dumplings, this time with chives and pork, and ate 15 of them in one go. With a full stomach, my body finally felt warm again. I started scrolling through the messages on my phone. Thank God, I still had a cell signal. There must be a cell tower on Redwood Hills, because even in the bomb shelter, my reception was surprisingly good. There were still a lot of hateful messages, not just from Jake but from Amber too. So she was done pretending. The power was out, and they were still wasting their phone batteries cursing me out. They must really love me. I swiped past their messages and opened the volunteer group chat. The others were still trying to figure out how to brave the snow and open up a lifeline, but every idea was shot down by reality. No one had a better solution. As we chatted, people started dropping out of the conversation, probably because their phones had died. Finally, I suggested we all give up for now, focus on our own survival, and wait for government rescue. We were alone and powerless against nature. It was better not to throw our lives away. The group fell silent. Then a girl sent a voice message, her voice choked with tears. When is this snow ever going to stop? No one answered her. Because no one knew. To save power, I turned off the emergency lamp and sat by the fire with a book, reading by its glow. The firelight wasn't as bright as a lamp, but it was enough. I was sitting on a thick cushion on a plush rug, a small blanket over my legs, leaning back against the sofa. It couldn't have been more comfortable. I only got through a few pages before I started yawning. Finally, I tossed the book aside and fell asleep. I woke up shivering. I opened my eyes and saw the fire in the stove was about to go out. I quickly threw in a few more logs. I was thirsty, so I drank some tea. After puttering around for a while, I checked my phone. It was already 9 p.m. Time to eat again, but I still felt lazy. I reheated last night's chicken stew and leftover rice on the stove and ate a few bites. As I was eating, the small night light next to me flickered on. The power was back. I let out a whoop and jumped up, turning on the main lights. I opened up X and saw a wave of celebration. Power had been restored in many areas. Amid the cheers, someone posted a somber comment. I wonder what price was paid for this electricity. The post quickly went viral. Everyone was expressing their gratitude and praying for the safety of those still out there working in the blizzard. But soon, another trending topic took over. It was an official announcement with two key pieces of information. First, the snow was starting to let up. Second, the government would be using aircraft to drop salt to help melt the snow on the ground, and residents were advised to stay indoors until further notice. The announcement caused an explosion of joy online. Everyone was cheering. The snow was going to stop. The salt would melt the snow quickly, and rescue would be on its way. A wave of emotion swelled in my chest, rising up my throat and stinging my eyes. My hands trembled as I put down my phone. I covered my face and wept, for my parents, for my loneliness, for the betrayal of love and friendship, for my own brutal death in my past life, and for the cold, selfish hearts that had offered no help when I begged. But I also wept because, in the end, there was still light and hope in the world, pulling me back from the abyss of my bitterness and resentment. I still hated Jake and Amber. I would never forgive anyone who had hurt or humiliated me. But now, I had the strength to face a new life. That night, I didn't fall asleep until just before dawn. When I woke up, it was already 3 p.m. I bundled up in my thickest down jacket and went out onto the terrace. The snow really had lessened, falling in soft flakes instead of heavy clumps. I was thrilled. I went to the kitchen and saw the gas was off. My heart sank again. Without gas, I didn't know how Mr. Peterson and his wife would manage to cook. I wanted to ask, but since there was nothing I could do to help, I decided against it. At least the power was still on. Back in the shelter, I took the large kettle from the stove over to the well and washed up. The well water wasn't frozen, but the drain pipe seemed to be blocked. When the water wouldn't go down, I just poured the used water into a bucket, and after I was done, I carried it up to the second-floor terrace and dumped it out. It was messy, but I couldn't be picky in a situation like this. My good mood made me want to cook something special. I took out some pre-marinated meat, lit a charcoal basin, set up a grill pan, turned on the smoke extractor, and started my own Korean barbecue. The slices of meat quickly began to sizzle on the grill. I added some mushrooms to soak up the grease. Then I picked up my phone, created a small group chat with Amber and Jake, and sent them a picture of the sizzling meat. Then I sent a smiling voice message. Want some? There was no reply. Maybe their phones were dead. Or maybe they were. I was hoping for the latter. It had been 2 or 3 days since the blizzard started. They had no food, no water, no warm clothes, and the power had been out. I couldn't imagine how they were surviving. Thinking about it really worried me. I picked up a piece of grilled meat, dipped it in the sauce I'd prepared, and took a bite. Tender, juicy, and packed with flavor. It was so good I could have eaten my own tongue. I had just eaten 2 pieces when my phone rang. I looked. Hey, it was Amber. Since I was in a good mood, I generously hit accept and put it on speaker. The second the call connected, a weak roar came from the other end. "Ch Chloe, what is your problem?" I casually flipped the food on the grill. "I don't have a problem. I was just showing you my barbecue. Don't you think it looks good?" She was panting, but I could still feel the fury in her voice. "Chloe, where are you?" "I'm at home." "I mean, where is your home?" I paused, my chopsticks hovering. "What? You want to come over? With all this snow, I don't think you can make it." She was breathing heavily. Suddenly she asked, "You knew all along, didn't you?" "Knew what?" "That I was with." She couldn't finish the sentence. I laughed out loud. "I don't know anything. All I know is that my barbecue tonight is especially delicious." With that, I hung up. There was really nothing left to say to them. The only reason I was still teasing them was to add a little entertainment to my boring, solitary life. She called again, but I didn't answer. Then she started sending a stream of voice messages, apologies, emotional appeals, begging me to save her. She must have been delirious from hunger and cold. Not only was I never going to save her, but even if I had a sudden surge of compassion, how would I even get to her? I replied with a single sentence. "You should spend this energy trying to save yourself instead of begging me. Besides, aren't you and Jake truly in love? You should be happy to die together, right?" My message made it clear I knew everything. Amber instantly became agitated, sending another barrage of voice messages. I patiently listened to the first 2, then ignored the rest. Then Jake started calling and texting me too, but my focus was solely on my food. Still, we had known each other for a long time. I felt I couldn't be completely heartless. So I took pictures of the grilled mushrooms and shrimp and sent them to both of them. Looking at plums can quench your thirst, so looking at food can stave off hunger, right? I'm just too damn kind. The next day, the snow finally stopped, but the temperature dropped even lower. I opened the terrace door, craned my neck to check the vents, and saw they were fine. I shut the door and went back to the shelter. As long as it wasn't snowing, I had nothing to fear. For the next few days, I stayed in the bomb shelter, binge-watching shows, scrolling through my phone, playing games, reading books, chatting with people by the fire, and just spacing out. I stopped paying attention to Jake and Amber. There were so many wonderful things in the world I shouldn't waste my time focusing on trash. I checked the news frequently to keep up with the situation outside. The snow clearing operation was in full swing, but because there was so much of it, they had to prioritize critical infrastructure. Residential areas were largely left to fend for themselves. But it was just too cold. According to official reports, the outdoor temperature had dropped to over 110 degrees below zero. Not only was it impossible for people to go outside, but even military operations had been halted. The coldest recorded temperature in China's Pole of Cold village was only 72 F. We're all just flesh and blood. Who could survive temperatures like that? But even though I wasn't paying attention to Jake and Amber, they found me. Jake sent me a selfie, wrapped in a soy sauce-stained blanket. "Bitch," he wrote triumphantly. "You thought you could freeze me to death just by taking the blankets?" Amber sent a picture of herself in a man's winter coat, eating instant noodles. "You thought I didn't have any food?" she gloated. "Are you disappointed?" Well now, I was surprised. Where did they get all that stuff? But I immediately recognized the coat Amber was wearing and the background she was in. It belonged to the old bachelor who lived downstairs. I'd seen him wear that coat before, and I recognized his apartment. That old man was a total creep who had been reported to the police more than once for harassment. He was also a petty thief who would take anything that wasn't nailed down. I'd once had to go to his apartment to retrieve a package he'd stolen. And a guy like that was willing to share his food with Amber when supplies were so scarce? I didn't have to guess what Amber had paid with. I didn't say anything. I just kindly sent her a picture of a grilled mackerel to go with her meal, and wished her and the old man a happy life together. Then, I posted Amber's photo in the building's group chat, tagged the old man, and congratulated him on becoming a groom with just a pack of instant noodles. The chat erupted. Some were disgusted, others made jokes. Most were amazed at the old man's generosity. No one knew when the disaster would end or when rescue would come, yet he was willing to give his precious food to someone else. Others started asking the old man if they could trade or buy food from him. After a while, the old man finally appeared. He must have realized what was happening because he started cursing me out for invading his privacy. I acted innocent. Amber sent me the picture herself. I was just happy for her. What did I do wrong? The people who wanted to trade for food got angry. They said neighbors should help each other. The fact that he gave food away for free to someone else, but wouldn't help them clearly meant he looked down on them. Someone even accused him of deliberately trying to watch them starve to death. Faced with his neighbor's anger, the old man panicked. He quickly explained that it was just one pack of noodles, that he gave it to Amber because he felt sorry for her, and that she left right after she ate. I immediately chimed in, as if it were an afterthought. Amber has no food at home. The only way for her and her boyfriend to survive is to ask the neighbors in the building for help. I hope the men in the building will learn from the old man's example and help her out. The moment I said that, the women in the group exploded. They swore that if their husbands dared to give that bitch even a single grain of rice, they would chop them into mincemeat. Satisfied, I closed the chat and focused on my grilled fish. After this, the old man would have to consider two things. One, in a crisis like this, what's more important, a woman or food? And two, what would happen if his neighbors found out he had a surplus of food? He wasn't stupid. He would definitely choose self-preservation. And from now on, Amber would be public enemy number one to all the women in the building. They would watch their husbands like hawks to make sure they didn't give her a single crumb. Amber, Jake, if you can survive this, I'll be truly impressed. The extreme cold continued. 2 days later, it started snowing again. This made me nervous. If it came down like last time, my vents would eventually be buried. Shoveling snow, power outages, watching the weather, following the news. My entire focus was on these 4 things. The next time I heard about Jake and Amber was 10 days later. They were both dead. Amber had frozen and starved to death. Jake was beaten to death while trying to break into a neighbor's apartment to loot for supplies. A picture was posted in the group chat. I stared at it for a long time. Someone commented that they had seen male neighbors sneaking Amber food. Why did she still die? Jake, on the other hand, had seemed to be in better shape. Could it be that Amber loved Jake so much she gave him all the food she managed to scrounge up? I laughed coldly. I knew them too well. Both were selfish and cruel. Neither would ever sacrifice themselves for the other. There could only be one truth. Jake had stolen all of Amber's food. As I laughed, I realized that tears were streaming down my face. I didn't know why I was crying. Maybe for the unconditional love and trust one had given, only to have it so utterly betrayed? No one could remember exactly how long the great cold snap of autumn 2022 lasted. After the snow finally stopped for good, the first thing to stabilize was the power grid, followed by the gas lines. Because it was still so cold, the water mains remained shut off to prevent burst pipes and further damage. Officials advised everyone to melt snow for their daily needs. As for other necessities like trash and waste disposal, people were told to manage on their own for the time being. Food and medicine were the most critical shortages, and the government did everything it could to distribute aid. In the extreme weather, humanity split into 2 extremes. There were those who would slaughter a whole family for a bite to eat, and there were those who gave their own lives so the old and weak could have a meal. But almost everyone had stopped panicking. The snow had stopped. Even though the cold remained, and even though mountains of snow were everywhere, people knew that if one man could move a mountain, then thousands of people working together could overcome anything. This hardship would eventually croaker on the stovetop, waiting with confidence for that day to come.